Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Irish Family History Forum's November 21st, 2020 virtual meeting. Falcha, welcome. Today's speaker is Rhoda Miller, reducing your genealogical clutter. Remember that this presentation is copyrighted and it may not be copied, reproduced, or shared without permission of the speaker and the Irish Family History Forum. Thanks for coming, and we appreciate you. And we want to say, come back next month.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you all for coming on. I'm in North Carolina right now, and it's as beautiful a day here as I believe I've been told it is on Long Island. So it's here we are thinking about getting into dust and getting organized on a beautiful sunny day, which is always adds to the challenge. So let me give you a little bit of a background as to how I got into giving this talk. When I was beginning my genealogy work back in 1993, I went to a conference and there was a talk on how to get organized. And at that point, I was getting overwhelmed with papers and families, and you know, things were not as digital in those days. And there was a talk, and I was so excited to hear this talk. And I get in there, and the first thing the speaker said was, "I'm not quite sure what to tell you because I'm not very organized." And my heart dropped to my knees, and it was very, very disappointing. So what I'm going to present to you today is my version of getting organized, based upon a lot of years of experience, but this is not one size fits all. So what I'd like you to do is think of this presentation as a grab bag of ideas, and you can just pick and choose and use what works for you. Maybe none of it will, maybe some of it will, maybe all of it will, but it's really up to what works for you. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the philosophy of being organized. We're going to talk about organizing your files, and we're going to talk about organizing your research. So those are the three main agenda categories. All right, so I see the key to organization as this test question. Where is it? If you want to locate information or a document and you know you have it somewhere, how long will it take you to locate it? Now, if you can find it fast and everything looks like a mess, but you know your mess, that's fine. If you can never find anything because you've got to sort through piles of stuff, then maybe you're in the needs of what we used to call the New York City Post report cards. You're in the needs improvement category. And I know some of you can relate to that. All right. So that's what some of us think about attacking our stuff and getting organized. And it could be a very scary event, but hopefully I can provide some solutions to making it more doable. So this quote is kind of out there a lot, and it describes why we create clutter-filled environments, and it disputes the advice of touching one item at a time, which we'll talk about also. Sometimes we procrastinate doing what we need to do, like maybe the writing of a genealogy report, or we create the clutter so that we can delay doing something else in order to organize it. I hope that makes sense to you. So basically, the problem with clutter is that it creates an environment that's not conducive to optimizing production, and it provides an excuse for doing one task in order to not do another task. So if we have to clear the clutter, we can't be doing something else. Okay. So the rationale upon clearing clutter is that it creates physical and mental space for us. And it reminded me of a joke from, or I should say lines from Annie Hall, the movie Annie Hall. So Woody Allen says, I thought of that old joke. This guy goes to a psychiatrist and he says, Doc, my brother's crazy. He thinks he's a chicken. And the doctor says, well, why don't you turn him in? And the guy says, I would, but I need the eggs. And I guess that's pretty much now how I feel about relationships. They're totally irrational and crazy and absurd, but I guess we keep going through it because most of us need the eggs. So our clutter is the eggs, and not turning someone in, I guess, is the chicken. All right, so let's move along. And I go to Yoda, the wise old Jedi. So feeling organized is a state of mind. And I've given this talk many, many times in different versions, in different venues. And I typically, this is difficult for me to say now because this is a virtual presentation and I can't see your faces, but feeling organized is a state of mind. Some of us, I find that a lot of the people who look forward to this presentation are already organized. They just want to do it better. So they're not disorganized. They're just constantly looking for self-improvement. And other people are probably here because others probably who they live with are saying, you've got to clean up, you've got to, your clutter is all over the place, get yourself under control. So it's a matter of finding what your style is and getting to know how you function best. And if you function best with your stuff all around you, well, and that works, then that's fine. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. It's a question, again, can you find what you need when you want it? And then also the problem is that many of us, not all, but many of us live with other people who are always saying, clean up your mess. And many of us are spread across dining room tables and other common areas of a house. And so we're constantly being badgered to clean up. I listen to the Genealogy Guys podcasts, and they've been talking about, well, I know that now we're into November, but this has been going on since January, and they're still talking about it. Starting last January 1st, they started a series of, when I say last, January 1st, 2020, they started a series of blogs of 31 days of getting organized. And so you can go into their blog, and what I have on this slide is just the first 10 days. And it gives you some examples of the types of things you can organize. Now, they're very clear to say that each day is not necessarily a one-day project. It's just tips and ideas for getting started in all of these areas of organization. And I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but in order to get from one day to another, you basically, first you can just Google day one, organize your physical desktop. And then to get to day two, you just put day two in search our blog, and then day 3 and 4, and you can read the full blog of each suggestion. So that's just a little idea that I put out there for you. And so, this all comes down to which path do you want to take? Do you want to just stay with your clutter, know what you're doing well, you're happy with yourself, that's fine and good? Or are you constantly seeking improvement? Getting organized is not child's play. This is from the Berenstein Bears book. So even from childhood, we're learning about the value of being organized, the value of cleaning up, the value of getting rid of clutter. And it's also very big business. We have TV shows about getting organized. We have magazines, books, all kinds of blogs, literature, websites. Getting organized is big business. And I think that's might be why some of us feel the pressure to get more organized, is because there's so much out there about being organized. Okay, sometimes it could be very overwhelming, especially if you've been doing genealogy research for many years. If you're like me, I mean, I've got 2 4-drawer filing cabinets, mounds of bookshelves, albums of documents, just so much stuff. And how do you begin to get through it, see what you need, reduce some of it, reduce it in size? So my big suggestion is to chunk it down and think small. If you say, I'm waiting for this perfect day, this perfect snow day, I can't get out of the house. Well, now we have a lot of COVID days, but you know, if you're looking for this perfect time, it almost never happens. But if you think small, I'm going to do a drawer, I'm going to do a shelf, I'm going to do a stack of papers, I'm going to do one file folder on my computer, it's much easier to accomplish small tasks than it is to think about the big project. You get a sense of accomplishment. Also, filing systems evolve. There was a time when I only needed 2 file drawers. Then I needed a 4-drawer file cabinet. And then I needed another 4-drawer file cabinet. And so systems kind of grow with you, but if you will keep everything, it's going to grow faster. I also suggest planning for expansion, because we do tend to expand. So at one point when I needed another 2-shelf bookcase, I bought the 4-shelf one, and guess what? The 4-shelf one is filled. So, you know, always plan for more, because that's kind of just what happens. And also my last suggestion is color coding, which also helps to chunk things down into families. And I'm going to be talking a lot more about color coding in a little bit. All right, those files can get to be burdensome. All right, and like Oscar, genealogists tend to love our stuff. And one way I like to thin out my files, I'm not saying totally getting rid of, but thin out, is to ask yourself as you're going through your paperwork, is it easily available elsewhere? Now, the first elsewhere that probably comes to everybody's mind is online, because there's so much that's online now that never used to be online. And I can tell how old my printouts are when I see things that have been printed out on a dot matrix printer. That's like really old. When I see things that have been typewritten as opposed to done on a word processor, that's really old. And it's probably been reinvented somewhere. The other thinning out, the other elsewhere, is the library. If I have books that I don't need to refer to a lot, or books that I just know I'm not going to read and I know they're available to me through the library system, that becomes a reasonable reason for me to be able to give them away. I don't say throw out, I say donate, give away. Then there's the 20/80 rule. And that 20/80 rule is that we use 20% of what we have 80% of the time. What that translates into is that we have a lot more stuff than we actually use. And do we need all that stuff around us all the time? So we're going to talk a little bit about that also. I saw a statistic somewhere that a 1-inch pile of papers translates into 1 hour of filing. So again, think before you print. I like to sit on my hands before I hit that print button and ask myself the key question: what am I going to do with this piece of paper? Do I need it temporarily just because it might be easier to do another process if I have some names or numbers or dates in front of me, and then I'm going to throw it away? That's one thing. Another thing is this something that I want to save because I might not be able to get it again, or it's not easily available? Where am I going to file it? What am I going to do with it? Am I going to put it on a pile to be filed, or am I going to file it right away? Because a lot of being organized is about maintenance. It's doing something with that piece of paper or with that file immediately so that you don't have to address it again. And again, this takes practice, 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 because this maintenance concept is a habit. It's nothing more than a habit. So the way you would break any habit is to just keep practicing it. And I say the one thing that I do before I hit that print button, I sit on my hands and I ask myself the key question: what am I going to do with this piece of paper? Or with this file, if I'm saving a file, where am I putting it? Am I dumping it on a flash drive, or am I putting it right away into a folder where I know I'll find it again? And this is just the Ohio principle. Only handle it once. If we touch it, your date. All right, there's a lot of Eastern philosophy. I guess that's kind of a generic term, but a lot of Eastern philosophy about the value of cleaning, of keeping things clean and clear and uncluttered, and shaping our space so that it gives us mental energy in order to better do whatever it is we want to do. In our case, it's genealogy. It's thinking about family, thinking about relationships, thinking about documents and analyzing documents and collating information. These are all very, I find, very focused activities. And if my environment doesn't allow me to focus, I have a problem. So again, this is just something that appeared in Tablet magazine. Most of you are probably familiar with Feng Shui, which is kind of the art of designing a room so that we can get better energy, better chi in order to function better. And there's 6 principles that apply to setting up an office. I mean, this can apply to bedrooms and living rooms and all the areas and spaces of a home. But there are some sides of their diagram that very specifically, I think, apply to genealogy. One area is health. If our health is not good and we're not in a healthy environment, then we don't function at all in any area. But love and marriage is certainly one aspect that we think about. Creativity, and genealogy is both an art and science. So creativity is important. Helpful people, people who can help us, career growth, spiritual growth, and all of these areas impact us in one way or another. So if you are into Feng Shui or you just want to look at some of these principles to see how they might apply to yourself, it helps you feel inspired, productive, and powerful. And when done well, Feng Shui will enhance your creativity, your self-discipline, and theoretically yourself. So some of the do's is to separate a home office, if that's the environment that you're working in, from the rest of the house as much as possible, by, closing a door, putting up a screen or a curtain, or even using an area rug to define your own space. And sometimes the view has a significant impact on how you feel about how you work and about your life. I've recently had to reorganize where I do my work, and now I have a different beautiful view out the window, and it really has made a difference in how I feel when I'm working. So live plants also make you feel good, makes a nice environment, a softer environment, and so on. Okay. And then there's Marie Kondo, and this book, her lifestyle, a life-changing magic of tidying up, talks a lot about decluttering. There's been spin-off TV shows. Marie Kondo has become a popular author, speaker. She's out there in terms of decluttering and organizing. And I've read her book. A lot of it applies to things like clothing, but she does have sections on, she has a section on books. She has a few sections that will apply to us as genealogists. So this slide and the next slide. And she categorizes book collections as those that are general, those that you read for pleasure, those that are practical, and those that are visual. And then there's magazines. And this probably covers the general categories of books that most of us have at home, because we do know that genealogists love our book collections. Unread books, if you're looking at a book that you never read and you say, I'm going to get to it sometime, she says that means you're never going to get to it. And never going to get to it, I now translate into it'll be available in the library if I want it. If it's something unique, obviously you're going to keep it. But if it's something, I've pretty much decluttered a lot of popular fiction. There was a time I was in a romance novel phase. They're gone. I read a lot of popular detective mysteries, mystery stories. It's gone. It's all available in the library. And the books to keep are the ones that belong, and she says in the Hall of Fame, and I say in your Hall of Fame. Those are the ones that you use all the time, your reference books, maybe books that you got as gifts, books that have been inscribed, books that have some kind of sentimental meaning to you. So look carefully at your bookshelves, and if they're overflowing and you've got books piled all over the place, think about what you really need and how they fit into your lifestyle. She also talks about papers. And her rule of thumb is discard everything. And then she goes on to say, file vertically. And I think the filing vertically is very critical in terms of keeping yourself organized. If you print out a piece of paper, let's say, and then you put it in a pile, a horizontal pile, and this pile is growing to that 1 inch thick that I mentioned before, that takes 1 hour to then refile, you lose sight of what's on the bottom of that pile. You just keep putting things on the top, and we tend to forget about the things on the bottom. But if you use vertical, if you have a vertical filing system, with file folders and hanging folders, whether it's in one of those hanging folder box or milk crate type things or in a file drawer. So lecture materials. Genealogists, we love our handouts. Handouts is a nice way of summarizing a talk. We go to conferences and we have all kinds of materials. We have material from vendors. We have materials from lectures. We pick up brochures, all kinds of stuff. And how many of us actually go back and use those materials? Personally, I know not very often. Occasionally, I'll say to myself, oh, you know, I heard this talk. Let me see if I can go find that handout, or, you know, go back to that conference materials. But most of the time, I'm saving it. I'm basically collecting it, but I'm not using it very often. And in fact, what I have recently been doing is scanning materials from earlier conferences, keeping it digitally because it takes up less physical space, obviously, and absolutely getting rid of the hard copies because I wasn't using them. They were just taking up space, and I just needed to declutter. And I'm now in the middle of downsizing and going through 40 years of 40 years of living in a house. So it's really making me look very hard at these kinds of things. And if I had been doing it all along, the job now would be a whole lot easier. Okay, and now we get to what I call the fun part of this talk, and that is color coding. And color coding to me is fun, and in many ways it's almost magical because I can always find what I'm looking for if it's filed in my color coding system. So if we're talking about physical files, paper, there is absolutely no shortage of color coding supplies, from paper clips to sticky notes to folders to hanging file folders to anything, dots, tabs, anything is available in a multitude of colors. And I guess you could all tell that one of my favorite back to school activities was shopping for school supplies. And that's, of course, prime time of the year to get these kinds of materials. All right, now, in both my physical and my digital filing systems, which are color coded, basically this is how I do it, how I have it organized. So here we have my grandfather Kowalski. My Kowalski line is yellow, and my grandmother, who was a Kotlowitz, and my Kotlowitz line is green. Now, when I first started, I didn't know very much at all about my Kowalski line. So Kowalski and Kotlowitz was all green because I knew Kotlowitz and he married in, and I just didn't know very much. So it was all green. But as I began to acquire more and more information about my Kowalski line, I had to break it away and I made it yellow. So now I can distinguish between those two lines. So basically I have file folders, physical and digital, based upon these kinds of categories that you see here. So I have paternal and maternal ancestors, their siblings, and each of them is one of 9 siblings. Coincidentally, they both have the same size families, so that I've had to break off their siblings into separate folders just because of the quantity of information. If they had 2 siblings, maybe I could keep it in one space, but I've had to separate it. And then just materials on him, And then this is my mother's father, and she has 4 siblings. She's from a family of 5, and because they're my aunts and uncles, I have a lot of material on them and their children, my cousins. So I've kind of subcategorized all of that. And then, of course, on my mother. I also break it down into places. So I have separate folders based upon the information I have of where the family lived. And my Kowalski line, my Kowalski grandfather, I call him the ultimate wandering Jew, because they were in so many places, this family, that I have a lot of folders. And my grandparents met and married in Leeds, and then they went to Montreal, and then they went to the Bronx. So there's just a lot of places. Now, I know that a burning question is what happens when yellow marries green? Do we get blue? No, we do not get blue, but green becomes yellow, so that when a woman marries in and her name changes, then all of her information is now under the married name. Her premarital life is still green because that she was part of her first family. And I'm hoping that makes sense. I know that's a question that a lot of people raise. Now I also have, and you'll see a screenshot towards the end of this presentation, what I do with the documents. I mean, yes, I have a lot of documents scanned and in those appropriate folders, but I also keep paper. And again, this is my personal choice. I keep paper copies of all the documents simply because I find it easier to flip through an album and see these documents, and it just makes more sense. It's just, I see it better and I think about it better in paper form. So I have binders that are color coded according to the family. And in those binders, I have the top loading sleeves. I have the document in the sleeve, and I keep those binders in chronological order. And I think that's another very key aspect of looking at your material and being able to see the progression of a family, and also to help you identify what records you might be missing. So if you're flipping through and you say, okay, I've got a 1900 census, I've got a 1920, I've got a 1930, oops, what happened to 1920? Did I ever get that? So it makes you think chronologically. And of course, we know every document is important for gathering as much information as we can about a family. There is some software that does color coding for you, and Legacy Family Tree is one where you can color code sides of your family so that you can get printouts that look like similar to this. And again, it makes things very visible, very clear. If you're a visual person, like I am, this definitely works. Family Tree Maker also gives you lots of options for colors. Now, I know some of you are asking what happens when we go beyond, I think you can see my cursor. So in this case, what happens when we get to this person's parents and grandparents, this parent's mother and father? If we have a lot of information, do we go into another color? That's really up to you. I use the 4 basic colors. I use blue, red, yellow, and green. And I keep, that's enough for me, for my work. But again, there's no right or wrong. It's your decision. It depends upon how much material you have. It may make better sense for you to branch off into different colors. And again, maybe not completely different colors. So for example, in here we see a Worthington line that's blue. Well, maybe you might make the male ancestors light blue and the maternal ancestors dark blue, or some sort of pattern that's predominantly blue. I mean, just have a good time with it, think creatively, but there's lots of options that the software gives you. TreeSeek, which is a branch of FamilySearch.org. If you have a GEDCOM file with if you have a family tree in Family Search, then you can create a chart that looks like this, which is also color-coded. They give you a color-coded fan chart, and it gives you an opportunity to try it if you upload a GEDCOM file. So again, that's just another option. And I've also applied my color coding system to my DNA results. And this is just a little graphic that I created. Again, it's very, very visual. So here, what I did here was Irving Salo is my father. So he's a combination of blue and red. So I kind of put him in a red box with blue font. And I did the same thing for my mother. And me, I got a little bit of everything. But again, it does help you think about the percentages that people get from other people. And these are just the direct ancestors that I've done. But these blank spaces, if you expand it into other colors, you could certainly do that kind of thing. There are other tools on DNA websites that help you with this kind of thing also. But this is just a way of applying color coding to it. Also in Ancestry DNA, they have relatively recently, they've allowed you to put your DNA matches into groups. And again, you can color code your various groups so that you can very quickly go into your results and see who's who in your matches. And then when you want to explore new matches, you can add them to a group if you find that somebody belongs in a specific group. So the color coding works well here too. And also Gmail has color coding. So, recently I gave a talk last month about it to the JGSLI about a project that I've been working on, and I was communicating with one person a whole lot, and that was in my Salo, my blue line. And so my inbox was very cluttered with a lot of email that had been going back and forth, and getting lost in other things. So what I did was I just color coded blue every email that I had in there that related to this particular topic. And again, you basically click on the star in your Gmail. For those of you who have Gmail, now other email systems may have it. I am not familiar with it, but I use Gmail, so this is what I know works. And you can click through, and it gives maybe, I don't know, six or so choices of colors, and you just kind of keep clicking until you hit the color you want. But I find this extremely helpful, especially when I've got a lot going on back and forth with other people. It helps keep my inbox organized. There's also a little tool for your digital files. I know that Mac has built-in color coding, but for those of you who are using a PC like I do, you can download this little tool. It's just a very small file, and that's free from colorfoldermarker.com. And then you can also color code your files, your file folders. And here again, you can see that my files folders pretty much follows the same system as my paper folders. And I think if you get your digital system to parallel your paper system, you have a much easier time thinking about where things could possibly be. And so I've separated out documents and correspondence and places and so on. So, so one example that you see here in the red, you see where I have Gross Eisdorfer. I don't have a whole lot on my gross line, so they're still all one color. Now, at some point, this gross line is going to branch off, hopefully, but that hasn't happened yet. Here you see, originally, remember I told you I didn't have very much on the Kowalski line, and so it was all one color. Now they've branched off, and I really need to create two separate folders rather than having them within one folder. Although I kind of justify it because both families were in Leeds, both families were in Vilna. So there's a lot of overlap in that line also. So again, that's another kind of consideration on what makes it easier for you to manage and for you to find your information. Here's a list of digital resources, and I know that this recording is going to be in the Irish Family History Forum's members only area for a month following this talk. So you can go in there and you've got all these links to various resources. I just want to say a word. I think most of these you're familiar with, certainly Evernote, Dropbox, but JedView I really like because it's a very nice app that's on my phone. And I just love it because I've got thousands of my ancestors with me everywhere I go. And there's a small, I think maybe it's about $20 now. But I think it's very well worth it because every time I think of something, I can just look it up really quickly. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about organizing our research. And what I'm suggesting here, you can do with or without electronics. It's just about how you're thinking about it. So first is, what do you want to learn? What is your research question? What do you already know? And this is where I like to flip through my paper binders to see what I know, what might be missing, what I have that could be helpful. Always look at social history. I'm researching a Holocaust family with a major Holocaust experience, and I just learned some social history that completely discounted records I'm finding about where they were born and so on, because there were false passports issued and a lot of information was actually falsified. And it's about a particular group of people where this happened. And if I hadn't known that social history, I'd be going down a really bad rabbit hole. And then what and where are your resources? Who are the people who can help you? Use your networking, use your online resources, post questions on Facebook and comment on blogs. These are the kinds of things. The experts are out there in every field and they're very available. You just need to make use of it. Check your resources, keep a research log so you're not duplicating your work, wasting a lot of time. And that's really what being organized is it's a time saver. So you're not doing the same thing again and again or wasting time looking for things. If you're successful, fine, that's wonderful. And if you're not, I always say, go back to social history. Look at the time and the place of the ancestor who you're investigating and what was life back then. Go back to the photographs, go back to the location, go back to doing a little research around, not about the family, but around the family. I highly recommend writing a research report, and a lot of people think that this is something that only professionals do. Well, it's something that professionals have to do, but it's something that hobbyists should do, because when you are writing a report, the process of writing makes you think about your research a whole lot more. And I say it doesn't matter what the format. So my last bullet, where any format is better than none. Even when I am creating a PowerPoint, it's making me for a presentation, or even sometimes I'll create a PowerPoint for myself, because to me, a PowerPoint, each slide is kind of like a bullet list, and I can move things, or I can move slides around and put them in different order. And it helps make me think about a problem in a very different way. And that's basically what we want to do, especially when you're hitting a brick wall. You want to just throw up the dice and let things come down in a different kind of a jumble, and so that you're looking at things in a different way. So I'm a very big advocate of writing. Another way of keeping yourself organized in your research and solving problems is to use tables. So in this table, I was looking for my grandfather when they started using the surname Salo, which is my maiden name. So he came on his 1913 manifest as Chaim Chaladowski, and he wound up as Hyman Salo in 1940. Now, what did the records say all along that pathway? So you can see very clearly what I've done here is I just created a table. I look for every record I have with his name on it. What is the year? I can see the progression. I can see, in this particular case, you know, an incorrect writing of the record, but I can see how the name has progressed and changed over the years. So my grandfather came as Chaladowski, but my father was born as Saladowski. So like, when did that happen? Where did that happen? And again, by just putting it in a table in chronological order, it makes things pop out very clearly. So we'll look a little bit, just a quick version of evidence analysis when we have conflicts in records. So just to use Elizabeth Joan Mills, this is my version of her grid. And basically we look at sources. What is the original source? That's the one we want. We do not want to rely on an index, on a derivative source. Derivative is anything that's not the original record. So derivative is microfilmed, which is a little controversial because sometimes that is the only original that we can get to these days. But photocopying, transcriptions, they're all derivative sources. Or is it something that's been authored? Did somebody write a book about your family? Just before we started this meeting, we were having a conversation about a book that Family Search has about someone's family, and it's being downloaded page by page by page. But again, that's something that somebody authored. It's somebody else's research. Where are the sources? We have to question those kinds of things. And is the information in those sources, is it primary? Was it given by the person? Is there a signature on a document? Was the document created in the time, in an appropriate time frame to the event? If it's not primary, it's secondary. So a census record is a secondary source, for example. vital records are primary sources? Or is the information done by is it unknown? So for example, we can have a death record and there's no name of an informant, or many death records don't ask for an informant. We don't know where that information came from. It's unknown. And then is the evidence, is it direct? Meaning, and the easiest example of direct evidence is a birth date. So if the document says a person is born on, I'll use November 20th, 1913, that's direct. Indirect says that they were 30 years old in 1930. So we do a calculation and come up with a 1900 birth date. But can the birth date be 1899? Sure. Can it be 1901? Sure, because it's calculated. Or if the evidence is negative, it's just not there. We can't make it up. All right, so using that, I did another table here. I wanted to know my great-grandmother, what was her maiden name? So I looked at all the records of her children, and there were 9 of them. Now, all the records are not on this slide because I couldn't possibly fit it all here. But I looked at all the records of all her children and made a table of what they said their mother's maiden name was. And as you can see, I don't know how you could have 9 children and no 2 children say the same maiden name of their mother. Doesn't make sense to me. But all these names are kind of sort of sound the same. But there were 2 records here, and this was on the New York City marriage licenses where they asked for the father's name and then the mother's maiden name. There was actually a note that their maiden names were the same. And so that was a clue that maybe they were actually cousins. And I've not found any records to prove that, but that's my evidence. Now in this table, I was looking for the birth date of my great-grandfather. So again, I took all the records in chronological order. I don't have any direct evidence, but in this table, I used Elizabeth Joan Mill's basic chart. And I said, is the source original or derivative? Is it credible? Is the evidence direct or indirect? And so is it primary, secondary? And so by looking at this analysis, and I'm not going to go into the details of it, I'm just showing you really here of how I set up a table in order to determine whether or not a record is accurate. And again, this is all organization. This is all organization of your files, organization of your research, organization of how you are thinking about things. And that's why I show this to you as an example. We should follow the guidelines of the genealogical proof standard of reasonably exhaustive research, which is not the same thing as exhausting research. Sometimes research can be very exhausting, but it's not necessarily exhaustive. We should absolutely keep track of citations of our sources. And again, a professional has to do it in a professional way, but if you're not a professional, anything you do is better than nothing. So it doesn't have to be a perfect citation, but keeping track of where you got the record is extremely important. We want to do an analysis and correlation of your information, and that's those tables that I just showed you. That's analysis and correlation. If you have conflicting evidence, you want to resolve it. And again, the information, the source, and the kind of evidence it is, that's how we resolve those conflicts. And again, I'm coming back to that, writing a research report, write a conclusion, throw it into a PowerPoint, do a bulleted list. Anything you do to get it written is going to help you think about it in a more organized way. All right, so now we have some, going back to challenges to organization. So we come into possibilities. We see loads of possibilities, and what do we do with them? And I just have another folder called possibilities, both paper and digital. I keep my correspondence, again, paper and digital files in my color-coded, like the possibilities, color-coded to whatever family it happens to be about. Again, I have separate folders for subtasks. So for example, I have part of my Holodowski family, I believe, went to Argentina. So my research in Argentina is a subtask of that family. And that's just an example. Again, paper and digital. Scraps of paper. Okay, this is, I love what I came up to do with this. Particularly in my early days of research, I was on the phone writing down information from cousins and people who I contacted on backs of envelopes. I had scraps of paper all over the place. I had notes in notebooks with families mixed up. Basically, I separated it all. I bought a dollar store notebook with the cover of whatever color the family was. So I've got a green cover, a blue cover, a yellow cover, and a red cover. And I just sat there watching TV one night, family by family, and with my little glue stick, and I took all these scraps of paper and I put them in that notebook. So now I have all my original notes and thoughts and information in a notebook. That's nothing but glued pieces of paper. It's like a scrapbook. Why is that important to keep? Because sometimes when you transcribe those notes, you might make a mistake, human error. The other thing is those scraps of paper sometimes can take you back to a time and a place of the person you were talking to or where you got that information that can sometimes help you reconstruct something. So I love my scrapbook of scrap paper, scrap notes. Odd size paper. If you have oversized maps, I have things from a lot of European countries that are size A4 papers that don't fit in our binders and in our folders easily, unless you go into legal size. So I have, for these super big things, I've purchased the art folders that the artists use, these big oversized paper folders. And I love them because they slip very easily behind a piece of furniture. If you have baseboards in your house, you can hide them very easily. And other things, stuff. So if you have, you know, just ancestral things that have been handed down from one generation to another. I have my father's old address books. I have my baby dress. I have just stuff. And what I've done is I've gotten archival boxes and put those things in archival boxes so that they line up neatly on a shelf, on a closet, and so on. Research trip, well, we're not doing too much research tripping these days, but again, when we do get to go, research facilities have all sorts of rules. We can't bring things, the things we can bring into a research are less and less, and I think after COVID, it's even going to be worse once we're back into repositories. But we've got to follow the rules. I keep a packed supply bag. I dress in layers with pockets so I can put my glasses in one pocket and some money or a research card in another pocket. And, you know, usually a repository will only let you use their pencils or things of, you know, just following the rules. But that's all going to change once COVID is done. So are we there yet? Okay, I've talked about digital files. I cannot emphasize backing up, and backing up can be in a cloud service, which is probably the ideal. Backing up can be on a secondary hard drive that you have attached to your computer. But again, if there's a natural disaster and your computer goes, that's going to go also. But just backing up, however you choose to do it. Your documents, your original and your intergenerational precious items should be stored. Your photographs should be stored in a place that's fireproof, waterproof, and lightproof. Those are the things that kill our precious documents, photographs, any materials we might have. Research in your own files. Sometimes if you're up against a brick wall, it's a good idea to take a break from that research for a couple of months. Clear your head, get the dust bunnies out, go do something else, research another line. And then when you go back to it, go research in your own files. You might find the answers right there, or you might find a record that you've completely forgotten that you ever got. Think about the next step. What happens when you go? Who wants it all? Do you have a plan in place? Is there a system that others know about? Can someone else figure you out? And this is a very important reason for being organized, is that when you're gone, somebody else is going to need to be able to get into your mindset and figure out exactly what you've got here. If publishing is a goal, then you need to look into that. And that also helps you get organized, because if you're going to publish, you've got to be organized. Otherwise, your outcome is not going to make a whole lot of sense or be the product you want it to be. And again, I cannot emphasize backup, backup, backup. So again, to come into a little philosophy, Christopher Robin said, organizing is what you do before you do something, so that when you do it, it's not all mixed up. And that's basically the Ohio principle I talked about earlier in this presentation. Only handle it once. Think about what you're going to do with a piece of paper when you're ready to hit that print button. Think about it before you do something, so that you don't have to organize again. So after this presentation, go stand in front of your research place. Look at the things you want to do that need to be done. Make a to-do list, organize your materials, chunk it down. Think about your 80-20 rule. Think about that, that 80% of stuff that you have that you don't use. Do you have to have it in your workspace? Do you have to have it? Do you have to own it? Can it be digitized? Just stand and look and think. So this is, I think Kerry is on the Zoom meeting, and she's posted on her Facebook page this beautiful picture where she turned a closet into her office space. And now I don't know where she put all the things that were in the closet. She would have to answer that question, but, and that was my question, but look at how she created a closet where she can, I think, I don't see doors, but maybe there are sliding doors that I can't see in the photograph. But she can close off this space so it doesn't have to be in public view. She took a small space, she got her act together, probably threw out a lot of stuff, and really did a very successful job. And here I have the photograph on the left is a friend of mine who, after hearing this talk about color coding, went and redid, and she also has an office closet in Manhattan. So this picture is actually in an office closet. And I've been doing a lot of reorganizing. As I told you, I'm going through stuff and moving things around. And I have finally been able to group my color coding. So the photograph on the right is my in progress, some shelving that where I've color coded my binders. And one of the little secrets why those binders are not all uniform, I didn't have like go out and buy a bunch of blue binders, but my kids have gone to schools with school colors and all these various things, and I've used a lot of their old binders. And so hopefully by using all these strategies, you will break through that brick wall. That is the ultimate goal. And I've got my email address here. So if anyone has any questions that are not answered, feel free to send me an email. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. Everyone, if you have questions, please enter them into the Q&A. Someone was very curious about your folders or places. How do you organize your place folders?
Okay, so what I keep is I have maps, a lot of maps that's in there, and also social history about the place. So, for example, Montreal, I've done some research about the neighborhood that they lived in, and I've got that there. I've got maps of the neighborhood. I have the address. I also have social history. So in my particular case, what was life like for Jews in that time and place, things of that nature. But I also have it digitized. Yeah.
I think you already answered this question in your presentation, but someone keeps paper records of all the family. Do they keep the adult children and the spouse with the man's family or the women?
I keep, when someone marries in, so when a woman marries a man and she accepts his surname, all of her files and records are under her married surname because that's who she is at that point.
So I'm assuming the color doesn't change if she was unmarried with children and if you don't know who the father was.
No, so before she's married would be, so the slide that I had showed the yellow and green. So all of her records, unmarried, she's green. She marries yellow, her records become yellow.
What if she doesn't marry but still has children,
Then
or we
stays,
don't know who the father is, or who the
then
father of her children are?
I would keep her in her unmarried name in that color, and then her children are in that color because her children probably have her unmarried name if you don't know who the father is.
Right. Yeah, because I was
Or
curious on how
discover
you
the father. If you ever discover the father and you want to branch off, then just choose another color. You kind of have to use a little bit of common sense, a little creativity, and a lot of what works for you.
Yeah, because I was just curious on how you dealt with brick walls and NPEs.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. We had one other question. Oh, Carrie actually responded about that picture you had of her closet. She said, I have storage areas above, and now they house a lot of the items that were less accessible, and she did get rid of a lot of things.
Yeah.
That's always an important thing. One other question for online backup. Do you recommend any specific services like Backblaze or Dropbox or Carbonite?
Yeah, I don't have any specific recommendation. In fact, I'm in that really awful category of just having a backup drive next to my computer and hoping the roof doesn't fall in.
Well, I use Carbonite myself, so I highly recommend that if you're ever looking into that. I also back up a lot of stuff. I use Google. I live in the Googleverse, and I use the Google Drive for a lot of storage, and that's up to 20 gig. So I have a lot of, especially records I want to share. I keep on that so my cousins can check in on different documents as well.
Mhm.
Okay, let's see if we have any other questions. Someone wanted to know about storing old photographs. What's the best way to store old pictures?
Well, the best thing not to do is to put them in a beautiful frame on a shelf that the sun hits every day. So that's the what not to do. If you want to do that, I suggest making a good quality copy, and that you can frame and, you know, put anywhere in your home. Basically, old photographs, any photographs really, should go in an archival, either a sleeve or a box, you know, depending upon your quantity and kind of what you have. But it should definitely be stored in an archival something. And definitely it needs to be stored in an environment that you live in. That's the easiest way to think about it. So if you're comfortable temperature wise, if you're comfortable humidity wise, and you're comfortable light wise, that works for any precious item.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. Jean, if you will join us again.
Thanks for coming, and we appreciate you. And we want to say, come back next month on December 19th when Alec Ferretti will be our speaker. Special thanks to Rhoda Miller for just a wonderful presentation. Really made me think a lot about the mess I'm sitting in front of right now. So again, Meryl, Rhoda, thank you very much. Everybody, take care, be safe. Next year, fingers crossed, we'll meet at the Irish Family History Forum for a Christmas party. And I got to tell you, I miss seeing your faces. I think we're doing our webinars, but it's kind of nice to see a face now and then, a familiar face. So again, thank you, take care, and we'll see you next month.